Hello, dear students. We are still in our first lecture, but this is the second part of the lecture. The title, as you know, is an introduction to your course and tracing the beginnings of the discipline of cultural studies. Last time we mentioned that cultural studies is a relatively recent discipline. It hasn't been there as long as other academic disciplines that you study in our department, such as the novel or drama or poetry or critical theory. It is relatively recent. So in this slide, we read that in the 1950s, that is the decade following the Second World War, the work of Marxist academics with a working class social background, such as Richard Hoggart and Raymond Williams, posited the foundations of cultural studies in British universities. Hence, the field has spread all over the world. So, I want you to remember these two names, Richard Hoggart and Raymond Williams, two university professors in Britain, and when they worked or started working and focused on certain fields of interest during the 1950s, the work they produced put the foundations for what came to be known as the discipline of cultural studies. An interesting part about the work of Hoggart and Williams is that this work was influenced by the working class social background to which the two critics belong. Hoggart and Williams, they come from working class families. They belong to the working classes in society, and this familial background played a role in their fields of interest when they started practicing their academic work. Also, the two critics, Hoggart and Williams, were Marxists in affiliation. They believed in the Marxist philosophy, which of course is the philosophy that focuses on the interests of the working class and studies in detail the conflict or the struggle between classes. And according to Marxism, the working class is the most important class in society, and they are usually oppressed or not given their full rights in many societies, especially the societies that have the system of capitalism in its economy and politics. And the Marxist philosophy tries to remedy this situation by studying the ways in which the working classes can get their full rights so that there is an end to class oppression and class conflict, and there is a sort of utopia or ideal society in which everybody is equal to everybody else, and there is an equal distribution of wealth and resources and so on. And each member in such a utopian society, according to Marxism, is bound to have his or her rights and to perform his or her duties or contribution to the society they belong to. Of course, this Marxist philosophy and the working class background is going to color several of the arguments presented by Hoggart and Williams, as we shall see in coming lectures. The two names are so important so that in a course of cultural studies like our course, Each of them needs to have a separate lecture in which to discuss the most important concepts that Hoggart and Williams have contributed to cultural studies. Geographically speaking, so the field began in British universities, but of course it spread all over the world, and right now it is like a global phenomenon. So, for example, in this study or in this slide, we see that there were selected developments outside the UK. Each country selected or chose the route or the direction in which the field of cultural studies will develop. If we speak about countries such as Canada and Australia, in the universities of Canada and Australia, cultural studies focused on issues related to the effect of technology on society and the effect of media on society. In places like Africa, the focus of cultural studies was human rights and the problems of third world in general, problems related to poverty or lack of health care or the need to develop natural resources and so on. In Latin America, cultural studies addressed issues of decolonization and urban cultures. Now, this is only logical, or this is something that should be expected. Different cultures would have different focus of interest because they have different interests and different priorities and different problems and so on. Developed places like Canada and Australia, the population in general does not have a problem of poverty or spread of disease or problems related to, for example, lack of the proper use of natural resources or inadequacy of electricity and water supply to homes or so on. So in such developed communities or advanced industrial cultures, the field of cultural studies will focus on media and technology, especially when we remember that this field began after the Second World War in the 1950s and 60s. And at that time, the Western communities in general, whether Europe or the United States or Canada or Australia, they started jumping into broad leaps and gaining big developments in the fields of technology, scientific progress. Society in general started gaining or harvesting the results of this progress. Each family, each middle-class family in these societies had home appliances such as television sets, of course radio sets were already there, refrigerators, washing machines, vacuum cleaners. Each family had 1 or 2 cars and so on. So living in such an age, the social phenomena were always related to what is the effect of this technology on our society. Is the family going to be affected positively or negatively when all family members, including children, watch television for so many hours each day and so on? So this was the focus in Canada and Australia. On the other hand, in third world countries, such as most of the African countries, the African universities are bound to direct their cultural studies to fields that are a priority in such newly liberated societies. You have to remember that the 1950s and 60s were the age of decolonization and liberation struggles. Many of the African countries and also Latin America, as you see in the coming point, Africa and Latin America were struggling for their freedom, although many Latin American countries had already received or got their freedom in previous decades, yet they were third world countries. They had human rights problems, they had problems related to social inequality, poverty, illiteracy. A great proportion of these communities were living in rural areas without adequate supply of electricity or water, pure water for drinking. Many problems had to be addressed related to the newly developed urban societies due to the migration of large sections of the population from villages and rural areas to the metropolis, towns and cities. And these groups that migrated and settled in urban areas resulted in problems of overcrowding and sometimes increased rate of crime and so on. And the study of these social phenomena would be a priority. If you are a cultural critic, you would see, did the cultural practices of these people change in relation to the emergent social phenomena? And what about the power systems, the wider systems of power in these cultures? How did they react to that? So, as we say, thus, the development of the discipline took different directions in different cultures, depending on the different state of progress and the different priorities in these societies. And up till now, cultural studies as a discipline is still evolving. It can never be fixed, and it can never be exactly the same course in different places. We expect it to be different in the Middle East from other parts of the world. And we hope that you can use this in order to apply it to your literary courses and to give your own contribution to the literary courses and the literary texts you are studying from all over the world. Thank you. Good luck.